Good evening and welcome to this edition of Newsnight. Now, last week we did spend quite some valuable time on education, and we were discussing the issues of quantity versus quality and, of course, the service delivery in that sector. This evening we discuss the health sector, and for one reason is that last week when we started the education discussion, we discovered that there are a lot of similarities in the education and health sector. The old man of the clan, Andrew Mwenda, is here. He's also the CEO of the Independent magazine. Andrew, welcome. I hope you had a wonderful Valentine's Day.
Yes, I had about 25 Valentines coming to me. I couldn't.
You had no choice. You had a problem.
So
Opportunity strike.
I had to rent a bus.
Yes.
To bring all of them to Serena for a dinner. You can imagine.
That sounds like a party rather than a dinner. All right, Andrew.
It comes when you are my age and you have so many females interested in you and your wife is away in Washington, D.C. That's what happens.
Andrew, let's discuss the health sector. Over the years, we see a crumbling sector where...
Really?
Yeah, a crumbling sector. Let me explain. Where several people, including yourself and us who are on insurance, are turning to the private sector for health services. We have seen heavy investment, including now the fact that Mulago itself is under renovation in the sector. But we still see many people stay away from these institutions because they don't trust them. You're either bribed to get a good service, or when you're there, you won't get service at all, or you'll have, we've seen women, pregnant women, mothers, sleeping on the floor in all government hospitals, in all these old government hospitals, dilapidated hospitals. We have covered, in last year when we were doing a series on the health sector, several hospitals which were run down.
But you see, you raise many issues.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, because you were trying to say the institution is fine. Just help me understand, in your own understanding, how bad is the situation?
First of all, I never said the institution is fine. I should tell you, the World Bank, in 2013, I think, did a study of healthcare performance in Uganda, Kenya, and Senegal. So I want to show you. And Kenya came top. Uganda was in the middle. Senegal was the worst. Now, I should tell you, Senegal has had a democratic system of government for all its post-independence history. It has also witnessed the first president in Africa, elected president to retire, Leopold Sedar Senghor in 1980. Then in 2000, a sitting president, Abdou Diouf, was defeated by an opposition candidate.
After 20 years.
Abdoulaye Wade, yes.
In
After 2000, the first president ruled for 21 years and retired. He was a philosopher poet, Leopold Sedar Senghor. Then he left his prime minister, Abdou Diouf. Abdou Diouf was the tallest president in the world. He was defeated by an opposition party led by Abdoulaye Wade in 2000. And in last year, Abdoulaye Wade, rather in 2013, Abdoulaye Wade was defeated by an opposition candidate,
yes,
Macky Sall. So we have seen that you have a democratic civilian system, no civil war, no military coups. All their presidents have been enlightened. In fact, this is the first time Senegal has a first lady who is black. All these other presidents were married to white women. So the question then becomes is why is the ability to diagnose disease in Uganda is higher than Senegal? The ability, rather the presence of hospitals.
These were the benchmarks of the report.
Yes, they were looking at what is the distance from a hospital,
yes,
from an average home to a clinic.
Yes.
What is the rate at which nurses or doctors can properly diagnose the disease?
Yes.
How much equipment is available? How many beds are available per citizen? Things like that. Uganda performed better than Senegal, in spite of the fact that we have a presidential monarchy in Uganda. We have had civil wars, we have had military coups, we have had instability. We would think that we have a dictatorship. Why has that democracy not worked? Kenya, which has also always been stable, has had an opposition party, defeated a sitting government, power has been changing and all this, was marginally better than Uganda. So I have this sense...
You cannot say that, Andrew.
Marginally the World Bank said marginally, meaning that the difference between Uganda and Kenya, all these countries are performing so badly, Maurice. Uganda, Kenya, and Senegal,
yes,
in the World Bank study, were performing badly.
Yes.
It is that if Uganda scored 27, Kenya
yes,
had 30, and Senegal had 22.
Yes.
In other words, it's not that they were fundamentally different from one another, they were all bad cases. Kenya was a case of a tenth eyed among the blind. But I want to make the point that it made me think, what exactly is the source? Because in the 1960s, Uganda had one of the best healthcare delivery systems of any country in the world.
Even, I think, about Obote 2. I think we still had great...
I'm not so sure about that. And then two, Kenya had very good institutions. What has destroyed these institutions? And perhaps we African intellectuals need to begin thinking deeply about what are the structural conditions that have brought to this. But let me come to the issue you're discussing.
Yes.
One of the things that has happened, the things that have happened in education have also happened in health. First of all, I should tell you that private healthcare provision in Uganda, according to that World Bank study, is the worst. It's not the best. You see, I used to make this argument so many times, saying that the government healthcare delivery is disastrous. I would go to Malago and I see accidents waiting to happen. I would go to government hospitals and they were so bad. Then I would go to Kampala,
International
Hospital,
yes.
Kampala. I would go to Nakasero Hospital or Kololo Hospital.
Yes.
And I say they're doing very well. But the private hospitals, which are better than the government hospitals, are very few.
And very expensive.
Most private healthcare providers in Uganda are non-licensed backroom health providers that are a disaster. One of the things that has happened during the process of liberalization and privatization
yes.
of the health sector and the education sector was the decline of government supervision. In fact, now I retreated from the position that the state should withdraw to the position that the state should withdraw from provision of services and concentrate. You see, competences need to be preserved. What has happened in Africa is that the state has been overdeveloped in function, but it is underdeveloped in capacity. So its reach is beyond its grasp. You have so many hospitals across every single village. This President Museveni
and health centers.
President Museveni has built 750 health centers across his country.
But some are empty.
Some
are just structures.
Yes,
without
what we
equipment,
are doing,
without personnel.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant by overdeveloped in function.
Yes.
When you are underdeveloped in capacity. I think that what the state should focus on is building strong capacities for monitoring and supervision and regulation of the healthcare sector.
But even
and then allow
yes.
the private sector to be the ones to deliver. If you have a strong, capable and effective state that can effectively regulate, monitor and supervise private healthcare providers, you are better off, because it is easier to build a supervisory, regulatory
body
and monitoring state capability than state delivery.
But
now,
we have also failed on the personnel bit.
Well, I'm coming to this other issue. The
yes.
other issue that Uganda is facing is that we have failed to separate two things: provision of a service from financing of a service. We believe that for the state in Uganda to finance a service, it must also provide it. The state can provide affordable healthcare to citizens by giving vouchers to parents to take the children to private schools, vouchers to patients to go to private institutions and get health care.
That is still bureaucratic. You're kind of saying there needs to be insurance. But it only means
Rwanda,
that me and you
Rwanda
who have actually...
than Uganda.
Yes.
Rwanda has
a national insurance policy.
98% of its citizens
yes.
medically insured.
Fine. But the process of us getting actually medically insured, the process for us as a nation, if you look at the current provisions the Ministry of Health is suggesting, would mean that me and you who are employed, or the few, maybe 10% who are actually employed, would be the ones bearing the pain for all the 90% out there that do not have any bank accounts and have no form of employment.
We should advise the people in the Ministry of Health to say, you follow the Rwanda pattern. The donors wanted to finance health insurance in Rwanda. Kagame refused. He said, no. Let every citizen of Rwanda, as we said about education, pay for their own insurance. We can ask every Ugandan to pay 10,000 shillings if you are poor.
Yes.
Just 10,000 there is not a single household in Uganda that cannot afford 10,000. Let everyone pay 10 or 20 or 50,000 depending on their level of income for their own health insurance. The moment you make health insurance free, you will create a moral hazard, and that moral hazard is that the one who is not sick, and two, I think that insurance should cover only 85% of your cost. 15% you must pay yourself, otherwise people will begin suffering from insurance, everybody thinking that they can get a free service, even when they're not ill, they'll go to disabled doctors.
Yes.
But let me come to the much fundamental point I want to make.
Quickly, we've run out of time.
Maurice,
yes.
For any country, individual, organization or company to develop, you don't develop or grow yourself by fixing your weaknesses. You do so by leveraging your strength. What is the strength of the state of Uganda? The state of Uganda has demonstrated excellent capabilities at what I would call allocative functions of the state, which is the ability to identify a weakness and deploy money to it. The weakness of the state of Uganda is at the level of implementation. Once money is pumped into education, the budget for healthcare in Uganda has increased from 57 billion in 1995. Now, 20 years later, it is 1.6 trillion. The budget for education has grown from around about to 187 billion in 1995. Now it is about 1.7 trillion. So in terms of the allocative function of the state, we have seen much more money deployed into health and education.
Yes.
What we are not seeing
yes.
is that the taxpayer is not getting value for money because the service rendered is not commensurate to the volume of money put there. So if the state is very good at allocative functions of allocating money, it's poor at implementation. Let us transfer implementation or provision of these
To the
services
private
to the private sector, and the state restricts itself to financing and supervision.
Thank you. We'll wrap it up there. And that was Newsnight. Change.
How many minutes?
So, just a minute. Just a minute. Let me get this man. Andrew, you're going. Put on your mic. No wonder Andrew wasn't. Andrew also is going to put on his mic. You reset his sound. Who's looking for me? Kadama. Munonye paper. Welcome to this edition of Newsnight. Now, in May 2012, we did host President Yoweri Museveni on the sport program. Now, what he did talk about at that time, several years down the road, you have members of parliament who, when they went to Chankwanzi,